You've gotten lucky that that random approach has been able to generate consistent results for people. You're relying a lot more on you as the person being the reason they buy versus the process or the framework that you've created being the basis of the transformation or why they would invest. The reality is your business will be capped because you cannot be the sell factor of a scaling business. Your customer is struggling to understand your process and your transformation because the entire thing is said through the lens of yourself as the business and company and not thought in the words and the verbiage of the consumer. If you remember nothing else from today, the signature framework is not about you. Hello and welcome back to Ambitious. Okay, so I am someone, admittedly, who does record sometimes on the weekends. I get up, I have my coffee, I take my dogs for a walk, and I love recording on the weekends because I find that I'm just like in such this like serenity state outside the craziness of the Monday to Friday, but also the downside of that being that I don't usually on the weekends like get up and get ready. Hence today of me and what I would wear to go get groceries, which is jeans, a white t-shirt, and a hat. So I want to kind of just explain the elephant in the room because I have had a couple people who've messaged me about this. If you're watching this on video, you will see that I'm wearing an ambitious hat. And so most recently we had a brand shoot. And at the brand shoot, we had what I would actually say is kind of a vibe. We've had these dad hats made, and we had them made for the photo shoot for just some stuff that we're doing for brand photography. Anyways, long story short, we got these hats done for the photo shoot, and I had kind of put up some teasers of those on social, and some of you guys were like, whoa, 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 are we doing merch? Because like I want merch. I want sweatpants, I want hats, I want all of it. And at least as I record this, there is no merch at this time, but it is not that it has not crossed my mind. Okay. So it is not that I have not thought about it. It's not that I have not even potentially, designed it and thought about exactly how I would have it look and what it would look like. But for this current moment, it is not out and we do not have any merch available. And if you are somebody who has ever done any kind of shipments, I used to, and my team will laugh. We used to do these welcome boxes for clients when they would sign with us. And we would send them this box with like all this different stuff inside. And like, of course, as a client, it's a great experience. You sign on for this new program or this new coaching experience, and you get this welcome package, and like all of it is really fun and exciting. However, something that nobody tells you about is the shipping and the tracking and the prices that are so all over because you have one person who's in Europe versus the other person who's in Canada versus Australia or wherever. And so, because I'm not quite ready to open up that can of worms yet, at this time, we do not have merch available. But it is not that it hasn't crossed my mind. And I'm just going to say for the current time, I'm going to put a pin in it and I'm going to come back to it. But in the meantime, I will be rocking this ambitious hat probably on social and on here. So just want to clarify the elephant in the room because I've had some questions about it. All right. So today, class is in session. Okay. Because this is something that you must have if you are someone who has a service based business. And it is a signature framework and a signature process. And there is so many reasons and implications that this has to your business in, a positive way. If you don't have it, it can have negative consequences on the business, some of which you might already be feeling right now. And so I want to unpack all things signature framework today because it is probably one of the first things that if you were going to work with me, I would ask you about because I want to better understand exactly what it is that you do and have you be able to explain that to me in a clear, concise fashion and take that. And I would leverage that in marketing. I'd leverage it in sales. I would leverage it in your delivery with your clients. I'd leverage it with your team who's potentially supporting those clients or, supporting inside of your services. So, signature framework, I want to unpack today. What is a signature framework? What does it actually mean? What is a signature process? This is also something that we're going to touch on a little bit as well, which is the genius model, which is a style of a signature framework. We're going to also talk about what are the kind of indicators, to be honest, that are going to be coming up in your business right now if you are somebody who probably doesn't have a signature framework. Because I've also had people who've come to me, and this may even be yourself, where you think, I have one, I have a process, I have a framework, but you come to me and you bring it to me and I don't understand it. And as a general consumer, if I don't understand it, it means it's not going to land in marketing and it's not going to land in sales because it's not actually easy to comprehend. So we're going to talk about indicators that if you have one right now, that it's not effective, or indicators that are really a sign that you need to get one established or that this is lacking within your business. Now, I also, again, have people who come to me that they say, well, Kate, I already have a process, I already have a framework. And when they come to me, they present it to me, and I'm like, there's so many mistakes wrong with this framework and with this process. And so we're also going to talk about the mistakes you might see or that you might want to evaluate within your current framework that could be sitting right underneath your nose. And I'm also going to talk a little bit about the impacts, the significant impacts that can happen when you have a really dialed in intentional signature framework. And how do we even create this, right? So if you maybe are wanting to develop this for the first time, or maybe you have one, but you're like, I kind of want to use today to be the opportunity to go back and refine it and edit it, this is also going to be an opportunity for you to do so. I'm going to walk you through the process of step by step how I actually create a signature framework. So we got a lot to cover today. It's not going to shock me if today's a little bit of a lengthier episode. So I appreciate all of you guys who will hang on with me, because this is something that I think is going to be insanely impactful in your business. And as I said, this is something that touches every department of your company. It's going to impact marketing, sales, offers, delivery, team. There's really no element of the business that is untouched as a result of creating and establishing your signature framework. So first, let's actually get what the heck is a signature framework, or what the heck is this model or process, right? So what is it? So the basis of it, and I'm really going to give you the definition, meaning this is not Kate's interpretation. This is what it actually is based off definition within the business space. So a signature framework is a proprietary process, a system, or a methodology that you develop that is clearly going to outline how you can help people to get results. Okay. So it gives structure to your services, to anything that you provide. So whether it's a done for you service, if it's coaching, if it's consulting, if it's a course, and it allows that transformation, that offering to be repeatable, reliable, and differentiated. Okay. If I want you to take anything from the definition of what is a signature framework or what is a process or a model in your business, it is that. It is those three words of it's repeatable, it's reliable, and it's differentiated. So, if you are someone who feels like you are not easily able to differentiate yourself, if you find that you're not able to rely on consistent results or transformations with clients, or rely on the consistent, I explain my process to someone and they always get it. If you feel like you don't have a rinse and repeat system, it is an indicator of a lack of a signature framework. So, this is really, if you think about it, your version of how your transformation happens. And here's the thing, I'm going to be honest. I talk to businesses day in, day out, and you come to me and I say, well, how do you get results? And you just say, well, this client got this and this client got that. But it's actually an indicator, because it's all so scrambled and so chaotic, that you don't have a process. And by not having a process, it really means it's random and you've gotten lucky that random approach has been able to generate consistent results for people. There's the other side, which is the person who maybe even has a signature process, but they don't know they do. Meaning you are actually doing the same things day in, day out with clients, but you don't even necessarily know how to put a name to it. You don't really know how to structure it. You don't know how to explain it. You don't really know how to outline the process. You know, you do the same with every client, but you don't really have any rhyme or reason to how you'd explain it. And so that's what a signature process will help you to develop. Now, I want to kind of give, a highlight of what this would be. So, one that all of us or many of us will know is the signature process of the 5-second rule. So this was actually obviously created by, shout out, Mel Robbins. Mel Robbins had most recently published the 5-second rule, which was literally counting back from 5 to kind of launch yourself into doing things that you didn't want to do. Now, the 5-second rule is something that is a process that she has used to explain and give us a clear understanding of exactly what to do. And most importantly, all of us know that if we follow the 5-second rule, what should the outcome be? So we know that if we are somebody who goes 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, get out of bed, or 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go, get your shoes on, go for a walk. We know that this is a countdown of 5 with an outcome of doing the thing that you really don't want to do. So there's a really clear understanding of the process and there's a really clear understanding of the outcome. So Mel Robbins' 5-second rule is actually a signature framework or a signature process. Now, in earlier episodes, we also talked about brand story. There's an episode that if you have not listened to it yet, let this be your invitation to do so, about building a brand story. And in this episode, we talk about the structure. And again, shout out because I have to always give credit where it is due. We talk about Donald Miller's story brand framework and we talk about the 7 parts of his framework. If you go to that episode and you even want to, if you want to fast track to the section where I talk about the framework, that's an opportunity for you to also see in real time an example of a signature process and of a signature framework. So the thing I will say is this is seen everywhere. And it's also something that is a process in a lot of things that maybe you aren't even aware of. So I don't even know if I've mentioned this on this podcast before, but I worked at Starbucks for a very, very small time. Very short. It was very short. But I worked at Starbucks for a very short amount of time. And they have a process that they use with their grande versus venti versus I think it's Trenta cups, and they have this understanding of if it's a certain size, how many shots it gets. It's a formula. It's actually a process. And what it means and what it does is it allows every drink to be consistent. So when you are even doing the syrups, right? Every size always starts with 2, and then you add an extra one for each size that you're up. So if you're the highest size, it's 2 plus 3 because it's the highest size, right? So they have all of these processes, they have these formulas. And why is this important? Because with this signature process that they have and their signature way in which they craft, for example, a latte or a drink, what this actually does is it allows every drink to be consistent. It's the difference of if you go to that Starbucks that's closest to your house versus the one that's maybe, I don't know, 20 or 30 minutes away. Generally speaking, the drink should taste the same. And that's because the process and the framework from which they generate them is identical. But here's the thing, which is why Starbucks is such a great representation of a signature framework. They have a framework and they have this formula, if you will, to the base of the drink. But they also have a little bit of room for fluctuation, which is where you customize it, right? So, for example, if you say, I want it extra sweet, they have a framework for that. If you are someone who says, I want it extra hot, there's a framework for that. So, there really is this core framework, which is rinse and repeat in every single drink. And then there's add ons that they've created processes around. So you are interacting with signature frameworks and signature processes all of the time. Like it is something that you in your day to day are going to be exposed to. But a lot of us are kind of sitting back and just watching these frameworks happen or seeing other people have them, but not necessarily integrating them in our own business. And today's that invitation to change that. So, even for myself, one thing I will say is, I created my signature framework very, very early in business. I created this within, I probably would say, to be honest, like my first year of business. It was one of the first things that I did because I really wanted to be able to explain to somebody how I was going to get them from point A to point B and exactly what the journey was going to look like without necessarily going into all the nuts and bolts of every single thing or exercise or task that I was going to do with them. So, I want to kind of unpack a little bit of indicators of what you might look at in your business that's an indicator you need to develop or you need to further integrate your signature framework. Okay. So, a signature framework, one of the things that I see that is a big disconnect is when someone's selling their offer, a glaring sign to me that you don't have a framework is you tell me about your time. You tell me how much access I get to you. You tell me how many sessions I get. You tell me how many calls I get. You are constantly selling the deliverables of your offer. You're not necessarily selling the actual transformation of what it is that you do. It also, I will say, is very apparent when you're trying to explain what it is that your offer does for me and you're having a hard time doing that. Or you can explain to me what your offer does, but it takes you about 13 minutes to get it from, so I do this. And then you go on this long paragraph. And by the end of it, I have some aspect of clarity of what it is you do for me. If you have a lot of language needed to explain what it is that you do, it likely is an indicator that you don't actually have a intentional signature framework. You will also see within your business that you'll see people asking you things like, so what exactly is it that you do? Or, curious, how is what you do different than so and so, or different than someone who does XYZ? So if you're finding people not even sure of what it is that you do in your transformation or feeling like they don't get it, it's usually an indicator that within your marketing, your sales process, and potentially, even in your delivery, it's not clear. In the delivery aspect, it's very apparent because if I go into someone's business and, for example, you come to me and you say, Kate, it's crazy because in this program or in this service, there are such a spectrum of results. I've got people who are really, really struggling to get results, and I've got people who are crushing it and are like superstars within this offer. Or if you're an agency, you've got people that are like, it's super, super easy to get them outcomes, and other people where it feels like I am, pulling teeth to try to get some movement here. And so you wonder, why is that happening? Well, that's really a basis of the fact that each client experience is kind of being approached as custom, which again, back to our Starbucks analogy, means that every drink that you're producing isn't really following a framework, which means it is going to taste different every time because there's no basis from which you're making it. So you'll see this translate to having offers where the variation in results is significant. And that's because there really isn't any process to why you're doing what you're doing and how you're doing it. Now, I also will say this is very obvious in sales because if you are someone who is pitching to people and you're selling to people and you're, even if you're selling in any fashion, if it's on a sales page, if it's in DMs, if it's on a call, the method of sale isn't really as important as the fact of wherever you're getting an opportunity to communicate your offering, you're getting price objections, or you're finding when you're trying to sell those higher ticket packages, it is not clear to people what it is that you do and how it is that you do it. And so you're really struggling to explain to people how you would get them from point A to point B without, again, just listing out all these things that you might do with that given client. And one of the things that's an indicator that I see when I'm auditing businesses is you're relying a lot on you as like this persona or your presence or like your personality. If I'm going to be, candid, you're relying a lot more on you as the person being the reason they buy versus the process or the framework that you've created being the basis of the transformation or why they would invest. And I want to just add something to this quickly because if you are someone right now who you find you're kind of making sales because you are known to be so great, or you're known to get really good results, or you have great, relationships with people, that's fine because obviously as a personal brand, there's an aspect that's always going to be there. So, if I said, hey, you could work with Tony Robbins directly tomorrow, most of us would probably jump at the opportunity, right? But the reality is your business will be capped because you cannot be the sell factor of a scaling business. So, yes, in the short term, potentially, it's still not advised, in my opinion, but potentially, could you be the sell factor of your business for a short amount of time? Yes. But if you are somebody who is potentially relying on your presence, your personality, your persona to be the reason why people buy from you, it means you're not selling your process. And if you're not actually selling a process, it means what you're doing in your business is not scalable. So, just something as a food for thought. Okay. So, if you are like, some of this is ringing true for me, some of this feels like it's landing. There's also, okay, we have this awareness that we want to create one, but there's also for some of us, as I said, you may even have one. And if you have one and those signs are still feeling that they're showing up in your business, we want to ask ourselves why. And oftentimes, the reason that that's going to occur is because there's a disconnect in how you've developed the signature framework. So it's not a matter of the fact that you don't have one, it's about how you've created it. And I see this a lot. And I never want to, minimize anybody for trying, right? Like at the end of the day, everything that we do within our business is a work in progress and it always has opportunity to be refined. So it's not that as I go through today, if you feel like, oh crap, I got to start all over, I don't want you to feel any way about that. Your business is always in refinement. Your business should always be in development, in analysis, in feedback. And so this is just an opportunity to go back through and to refine it and to use this as new awareness to make a revised next level version for you for the next level of the business that you want to have. So The thing that I will say is if you are someone who has a framework, what often I will see is that the framework is becoming overcomplicated. So you may have a framework, but what's happening is you're trying to make sure that your framework nods to every single situation. So someone will say, but Kate, I do this with a client, and I do that with a client, and I do this with a client. Yes, but what I want you to think about is you're pulling themes. So the idea is to kind of put all these pieces on the table, and then we're going to sort them, and then we're going to look at them again, and then we're going to sort them, and then we're going to look at them again, and then we're going to sort them again. And before you know it, you've streamlined and streamlined and streamlined and distilled it down to a place where we actually have something that we can see and grasp onto. What most of the time happens is people will want to make sure they can see all the pieces that were there at stage one. And that keeps you from having a framework that really makes sense because you're trying to make sure that every single thing that you could ever or have ever done is visible in this framework. But it's part of the reason the framework's not working is because it's not actually summarized or distilled down enough. I also will hear a lot of language that is very general and doesn't necessarily have an outcome associated with it. The words you're using are not necessarily an indicator of what you're going to do for me, right? So they usually need to be words that are associated with an outcome. So, for example, when someone's framework has the word growth in it, well, what does growth mean, right? So, for example, if we're looking at something, word wise, like I'm going to help to create awareness. Well, is it like brand awareness? Is it customer awareness? Is it, what are these specifics that might allow us language wise to make that a little bit more clear as to exactly what it means and what it's going to do for me if I was to work with you? The other thing that I see is when you're making the framework, it's not really about the client, it's almost about you. So you're making it about what you're going to be doing and what your involvement is and what you've seen happen, and you're making it about your involvement in the process. You're making it about your role versus making it about what is the client going to see and what is the client going to do. And this is something that is really, really important. If you remember nothing else from today, hopefully you remember more than one thing, but if you remember nothing else, this is my hope. The signature framework is not about you. Your signature framework is not about you showing how great you are as the individual, as the person, the persona, or the company. It's about ensuring that the person who is consuming your marketing, your sales, and your offer and product are clear on their transformation, what they're going to get, and the outcomes that you're going to help them to achieve. That is a signature framework. So if you are someone who doesn't have that and you're making it about you, even though you have one, your customer is struggling to understand your process and your transformation because the entire thing is said through the lens of yourself as the business and company and not thought in the words and the verbiage of the consumer. Okay. So it's a really important distinction because it can feel like, well, Kate, this is what I do. I'm like, yes, but the language has to be in the tone of what the customer would see for themselves and what they want, what their desires are, and the outcomes that they're looking to achieve. The other thing that I will say is that oftentimes there's this desire to make a transformation linear. And I understand the intention of why people do this, right? It's like step one, we do this. Step two, we do this, right? The thing that I prefer is something that, for example, could be cyclical, it could be layered, it could be multidimensional, meaning, and this is kind of a nod to a genius model. A genius model, by the way, is a type of signature framework or a style of signature framework. This, again, also not created by me. You can literally go to Google or ChatGPT and search genius model, and it will actually show you a visual example of this. But genius models are cyclical. So they basically are where I want you to picture a circle, okay? I want you to picture a circle in your mind right now. And a genius model is basically where you could, for example, go around that circle one time. And that's, for example, mastery level one. You go around that circle again twice, that's mastery level two. So, like, it means that the model you've created has infinite possibilities of growth. Whereas, for example, if I have a signature framework that says step one, get you awareness, boom, done. Step two, get you this, boom, done. What that means is, as a business, when someone has done our framework, they're done. Now, in some very, very few industries, this makes sense, right? Okay, so let's just put it this way. Say someone is trying to have a child and you are a fertility expert. You might have a framework of how you help someone with fertility that actually does have an end destination, meaning you're going to ultimately get pregnant. If you get pregnant, the cycle is done. Like, you have gone through it and you've completed the process. So there's step 1, 2, 3, 4, get pregnant. That is something that could be the process of something that's linear. That's where steps, for example, would make sense. However, even then, if someone wants to have a second child, what happens again? They go back through it. So, what most frameworks we want to have are cyclical, or we want to have them be something that have levels of mastery, meaning the goal with the transformation is getting someone from point A to point B in this journey, and those steps will help them get there. But ideally, even when they get to the transformation, we would want to say, well, if someone wants the next level of growth, how do they go back through that framework and do it again? So, the equivalent being, even if we think about like levels in karate, right? There's levels. Each time you are going through a framework of skills and mindset and physical abilities that are going to help you to get that next level belt. And there's a framework for that, but you're not really done for a very long time until you get to black belt. And I'm not entirely educated on karate, but I would hazard to guess there's also some next level skills that probably can be added onto that as well. So the idea is that when many people make their frameworks, they try to make them linear, and that you make them linear oftentimes in the belief that if you make your process linear, that's going to be the thing that helps someone to see 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, you've got your outcome. And it starts to make you feel more confident about selling what you're selling, because look at this, you're going to go from here to here and then you're done. The problem is you're also going to lose a lot of business, and you're also not really giving any extension of the customer journey. That means that your customer journey is very short, and there's no life cycle of how someone can grow with you within your service or within your offer. So it ideally, we don't want it as step 1, 2, 3, 4. We want it more as levels of mastery, or a cyclical journey, or something that someone can progress and develop through and master at levels, versus just having you start it, you do it, you're completing it. I am briefly interrupting today's episode to tell you about something that is really exciting, and it is happening in exactly 1 week. 1 week from today, we are going to be opening our doors to our ITI Accelerator Mastermind. This is something that we typically only have on promotion max twice a year, typically on average once a year. And this is the only other time that you're going to see this kind of promotion around this mastermind. This mastermind is something that I've had for many years, and it is really truly my baby. It's something that I have created that is really a accumulation of all the things that I have known to be the most impactful in my journey. Things like having a mentor and one-on-one coaching with myself to help you to keep moving and tailoring and customizing things to you, helping you to learn the principles of entrepreneurship through modules and worksheets and downloads, having the ability to have access to a panel of experts in mindset, operations, legal, and so many other topics. This mastermind is truly, in my opinion, like no other on the market. This is an opportunity for you to really step in the next 6 months to be able to grow and to scale your business. So, if you are someone who's been listening to the Ambitious podcast and you're like, I am taking notes on these strategy episodes and I am taking notes on the different frameworks taught, this is just scratching the surface. There is so much more that is to be learned, and most importantly, so much more that is to be integrated when you are someone who's really ready to scale your business with support. So I want to keep this short. If you are someone who's interested in joining us inside of our promotion, joining us inside the Accelerator Mastermind, keep an eye out for all of our socials next week, because we will have a special promotion that's going to be available for our audience for a limited time only. And spots are limited inside this program, so it will be first come, first serve. Without further ado, let's get back into the episode. The other thing that I really want to recommend is, and I see this unfortunately a lot, many business owners will create their signature framework or their process in a Google Doc. Like, you will just be sitting in a Google Doc making notes, and those notes become like, hey, this is the process I use for my clients. And the thing that I often ask people is, where's the data? Where's the verification that this even works? Like, who's to say that this signature process is a signature process? So the other thing that I want to say is, signature processes and signature frameworks are not something that you brainstorm in a Google Doc. that you came up with. They need to be something that is a proven process. This is not something that is a concept. It's something that you want to actually test and prove. So for our process that we have within our business, and mine is attract, convert, deliver, automate, and expand. When we look at that process has been proven. For example, there's a reason that I have automation before expansion, which is delegation. And that is because you should never be hiring someone before you've actually tried to put a process in place to streamline it. Before you hire and hand it off to someone, make sure that you have a process in place to do it first. So there's a reason that those stages are in that order of mastery. And that's because you don't ever delegate before you systematize or before you automate. And so that was something that I only created after I had seen so many businesses trying to quickly delegate things when they had no processes or, frankly, any right to do so. And the other thing that I will say is if you have a framework that, again, you have something, you have an overview, you have, the summary of the framework, but you don't really have any visual explanation as to how that works or how that's possible or how it's integrated, that is a problem. Because you need to be able to have someone at a quick glance or at a quick explanation be able to understand what your framework is and what it does for them when it comes to the transformation. So I also really, really recommend people having some aspect of a framework so people can easily see themselves within it or easily understand the larger concept. So if you actually integrate a signature framework, you're going to feel it in your business. Okay. You could probably tell that already. You're going to feel this within every bucket of your business. It's going to, most importantly, position you as a really easy to understand authority and, truthfully, a thought leader. If you are someone that has worked with clients, taken the data and information of that, put that into an outline and a summary of your work, summarize that into stages or progression of how somebody could progress and, grow in their mastery of their work with you. If you are someone who's done all of that, that is something that someone does as an authority, meaning someone who's, verified within their space, someone who can be vouched for within their space versus somebody who can't. That is the indicator of someone who is a thought leader, somebody who has thought through the processes and the transformation versus someone who hasn't. It also is going to add insane tangibility to your services. So if you don't have one, or even potentially, again, have one that's not necessarily easy to understand, it's going to have infinite impact on your offering and your ability to serve it and your ability to sell it, because it really structures it into something that, again, people can explain, and that you can explain and that other people can understand, and that also people going through can get consistent results. It is going to make your curriculum so much easier within your offerings. It will make your processes for your clients and onboarding so much easier. It will make your content so much easier. Guess what my content covers? It covers marketing, how to attract, sales, which is conversion, delivery, which is your offer and product suite, your automation, which is the systems and processes within your business, and expansion, which is team delegation. All of that is the basis of all my content. And why do I do that? Because if I have that as my framework and my offer, and I present the framework and my offer in my marketing, well, if you resonate with my marketing, you'll resonate with my offer. So it's a through line through the entire business. And this is why it's so important to have one, because without having it, it means a lot of the pieces are disconnected, or you're going to find you're doing 10 times the level of work to get a sale or to get clients results than you could have. It also, I will say, is the foundation for actually building assets for your business, right? So if you want to have intellectual property even for your business, you can actually trademark your process. You can trademark how your journey of your offer is, or how your journey of your transformation is, and make that yours. You can actually build keynotes around this. If you want to go into speaking potentially, this is something that you can use as the basis for what you teach within keynotes. You can structure programs around this. You can also structure your offer suite around this. The most important to me, I think, of like the impact of what it does, if I was to have to like pick one, is the fact that it really eliminates buyer confusion. Like, if we could distill it down, it really eliminates the confusion of what you're buying. It will eliminate confusion in the marketing. It'll eliminate confusion in the sales process. And also, it will eliminate confusion in delivery. right? But it really eliminates buyer confusion. If I could distill the significance of a signature framework down to one thing, it is that it is going to eliminate buyer and customer confusion before they're a customer, in the process of becoming a customer, and once they're a customer. All of that will become streamlined because you have a framework. So we know that the signature frameworks are impacting every area of the business. We potentially can see that there's some areas where our framework clarity is lacking, or maybe we need to be creating one. And we also know that if we had one, what it could do for the company or what it could do for your business. So let's make one. Okay. So let's make a signature framework. Let's make a process. So, first, I want you to actually understand the transformation. Okay. So, step one is you really want to start with what is the end destination in mind? So, where's the person starting right now, and where is it that they're going to end up? I need you to define success. You have to define success within any transformation. And if you're like, yeah, but they could do this and they could do that, we need to keep workshopping it then because it's not actually clear. You need to have clarity of where does the person start and where do they end up, okay? So, things to think about. What are the pain points that they're currently experiencing before they work with you? What are the situations that they're experiencing in their day to day life? What are the thoughts that they're having, or the beliefs that they're having, or the perspectives that are coming up for them consistently day in, day out? What are the patterns that they have, or the habits that they have that are not serving them? What do they believe to be true that is not necessarily true, or that you believe to be a myth? Okay, so we want a little bit of context of the current state. Then we also want to have context of end destination, which is when they have achieved, once they have actually got to where they want to go, what does that look like? What does their mindset look like there? What do their beliefs look like there? What are the behaviors that they have looking like? Who are they once they have achieved and done the thing that they need to do inside of your world? Okay. So we need to become super, super clear about the before and the after. We want clarity at the before and the after. And I want you to think in step one here, which again is defining the transformation. In step one, we're looking to just get clarity of where they are and where they want to go. And we're using these two pieces as your bumper lanes. Okay. So that's your bumper lanes from which the middle portion, the meat, that's the two buns. Okay. The meat in the middle, that's going to be your signature process. That's your signature framework. But we have to be able, when we communicate again via marketing, sales, or delivery, we have to be able to explain the difference between before and after. And then we're going to fill in the process of the meat in the middle. Okay. So, step two, what I usually would outline with a client is usually there's kind of two parts to step two. So, not to make it too complicated, but there's two parts to this. Usually, step two is defining 3 to 5. This is the goal, is 3 to 5 distinct stages or pillars, and I'm gonna tell you how you're gonna do that. The exercise that I do with a lot of people in business is I will say, "I want you to think of a client." Okay? So think of a client right now. Great. Her name is Susan. What's up, Susan? Okay. So Susan is someone we have in mind now, and we know where she is now at her current state, and we know where we wanna get her as her transformation. So what I would have you do is I would have you pull out a Google Doc, pull out a piece of paper, and I want you to think of that Susan client that you've worked with. I want you to outline line by line all the different things that you've done with her. And I want you to do it in order. Okay. So I want you to say, well, first we probably say, I'm a social media manager. We're going to use that as a case study. I'm a social media manager and I have a client named Susan. Susan's coming to me for social. I love the spin on that. And total side note, but Susan comes in. She's at this place where she's feeling like she's struggling with social media. She has no clarity. She doesn't know what to post. So I might go through her current profile. I might then decide to pull an analysis of what I think is the current disconnects. I would then maybe get her on a phone call to go over the kickoff call of exactly what we would outline as the process for her and what her strategy would be. Then I would go into getting access to her accounts. Then I would go into building out a content pillar bank and a messaging area. And then I would use that to build out her marketing plan, right? So you can see it's just like step by step, what would you do? And I want you to literally write these down line by line on a piece of paper. Okay. That is, and I want you to do it from the start of the journey till the end. So for me, If I was someone, for example, who I work with, most of my clients on average, I work with for 6 months, I might have 85 things on that list. I might have 102. That's okay. It's not a matter of you should have, this amount or less, this amount or more. It's not about that. It's about the fact that we want a big brain dump of all of these things just visible to us, of an average client that you would work with. Okay. So in step 2, when we say we want to identify the core stages or we want to identify the core phases, my job with businesses is I go in and I look at this big lineup of all the things. So again, they have the bumper lanes established and they give me everything in between. Then I go in and I have to be able to distill down all of what they do into 3 to 5 words. Okay? So this is the main thing that I want to accentuate. You want to be able to have those words be able to be outcome focused. Okay. So for me, if my first one in my framework is attract, that is because you're able to use your marketing to attract the ideal client that you want to work with while building brand and prepping people to go from curious to client. That is the purpose of the attract section. Okay. So there's many things that go into that. It could be, brand strategy, it could be messaging, it could be content, it could be marketing, it could be funnels, it could be launches, it could be all of that. But the goal being helping you to build brand as a differentiator, use your marketing to build brand, as well as taking people from curious to becoming interested in becoming your client. That is the purpose of the attraction phase. So, as I said, launching social, all those things can go underneath that. But the basis of it is that's what we're trying to do with all those things that we're doing there. So, what I want you to do is I want you to take it as sections, okay? So, if it was me, I would look at this big list of 100 things and I would try to circle together common things. Well, here we're just auditing all their stuff. Here we're building them a plan. And then here we're, trying new habits. And here we're doing X, right? So you're trying to just find similarities, right? If you had to sort them into 4 piles, for example, if you're a visual person, if you had to sort them into 4 piles, how would you do that? Why would you sort them in one pile versus the other? So this is going to take a little time because you're going to want to go through and say, okay, well, what are the commonalities here? But once we have that, we're going to be able to actually name each stage. Okay. So we're going to actually name each of those processes. So maybe the first one might be, clarity is kind of phase 1, 2 we build, and then 3rd we scale, right? So maybe that's your 3-step process, which is, we again clarify what your current process is for your Susan. Let's go back to bless her heart, Susan. We're going to go to Susan, and Susan, we're going to help her to clarify what her current strategy is. We're going to build her a new plan, and we're going to scale her socials with that plan. Right? So it's like we're going to help clarity, build, and scale. And again, I'm going to kind of break the 4th wall here because when we have these three phases, say Susan comes to me and she's only on Instagram, right? And she's like, "Can you just manage my Instagram?" Absolutely. So we do this process, we clarify her strategy, we build it for her, and we scale her Instagram. But then she says to me, I want to have more repurposing. I want to have more people who know what it is that I do. I want to have, more visibility. Well, again, we go back to clarify, which is clarifying the strategy that will help her to become more visible, building her a visibility plan, and then scaling her visibility. Then she says, well, I don't really have any long form content. And I'm thinking that I might want long form content. So I'm really focused now that I have Instagram as an activator for conversion and I've got more eyes on me. I want people to spend more time with me and I want to have more consumption. Again, we go back to clarify, which is clarify how to keep retention in her audience, build her potentially a YouTube channel or podcast that keeps that retention, and then scale that channel, meaning looking to increase retention over each podcast or video that she does. So you can kind of see the pieces coming together here. It means that it's cyclical. It's not done. She's not done because she's scaled her Instagram. There's so much more that she can do, but we have to be able to clarify how someone would go through that again and again. So step 2, remember, step 1 is define those bumper lanes. Step 2 is identify all the things you do in between and clump those into stages. Again, 3 to 5 is kind of what we're going for. If you have more than 5, in my opinion, you don't have a signature process. You don't have a signature framework because it means that there's still way too much explanation, way too much discussion needed in order for someone to be clear on exactly what it is that you do for them. So, in my personal opinion, it would be an opportunity to go back and still refine a little bit more, would be my recommendation. Now, step 3, we want to actually look at what is achievement in each of these. So, we want to be able to outline what is success in each of those phases. So, what are milestones you want them to have in each one? What are mindset shifts you want them to have? What are skills that they might develop in each section? What are challenges that they are going to overcome in each one of those? And how do you help people to overcome each? Step 3, again, is really making clear of the outcomes in each stage. One thing that I love to have all my clients do is that they need to be able, in their signature process, to be able to explain each of the words. So again, let's just go back to Susan. The framework we used for her was clarify, build, and scale. Well, I would want to ensure that you have a 1-line sentence or 2-line sentence that allows you to easily reference and explain what each one of those phases means. So, what does it mean in the sense of what outcome is it going to establish for someone? Where is it going to get them to? What is it going to help them to achieve? I want to be able to see the outcome it would generate for me. It's really, really important. So, you just don't have a bunch of labels of, random names, but these names are associated again with outcomes specifically. So, this allows for deeper context of how people can see the transformation evolving, right? So it's not just get you clarity, build you a plan, scale it, right? Like that's the simple high level of it. But we would want to say, for example, back to clarity, the clarity would be helping you to clarify the person you're speaking to, the problem you're solving, and the process in which you solve it, and the promise of where you're going to get them, so that we can take that clarity and ensure that it is consistent throughout all your messaging and marketing, throughout all of the channels that we create for you, right? That might be, and again, that also those P's, by the way, are my framework from somewhere else. It's another framework. But those P's are something that I might use in my outcome statement. So someone goes, "Oh, okay, I can see the clarity. Got it. I would have to know the person, the problem, the promise, the process. Got it." So they feel like they can actually see what it would do or what it would look like and also what it's meant to do, so that we're calling in the right ideal client who's designed for the offer that you have and the transformation that you're providing, right? So we can see that what we're going to do and what it's going to do for you, what we're going to do or what we're going to focus on and what it's going to do for you. So you can kind of see this theme throughout. And then, to be honest, step 4 is, now that we've got our bumper lanes, we have our whole list of all the things we used to do for somebody, and we chunked those into themes. For each of those themes, we've kind of given ourselves a name for them and an outcome statement or two as to what they mean or what they represent. And now we need to name the model. Okay. So we need to name the process. So, for example, another example that just came to me as well. If you've listened to a couple of our episodes, George Bryant was also on the show, and he talked about his customer journey framework. He has 5 steps to his customer journey framework. And again, his model is cyclical. So, that would be a model as well as a framework. Another episode we did was another framework, which was our elevation content model. The elevation content model is a framework. It's a signature process of how you get results, and it's a summary of stages that, again, you can go back through again and again. So you want to name it. His is, the customer journey. He also calls it the Apple framework. So it's APPPLE. So his framework, the Apple, the acronym of Apple, is associated with certain words. That is his signature framework. He created that. It's something that he made, right? So even for me, the elevation model was something that I created. It was actually originally something that I had outlined into a triangle, and the triangle was upside down originally. And so I remember I taught it at an event, and Ashley, shout out Ash for bringing this to my attention. She's like, "Kate, you should flip it. You should flip that and make it the elevation, meaning you're trying to climb toward the top with what you're doing in your content. Like that's the destination that they're going to. So it's an elevation, like a mountain, like it's like an elevation type of model." And that's literally how the elevation content model was created. So you want to name the model. And again, you want to name it something that makes sense. You're not just saying like the Bob model, right? Like it needs to be something that is making sense because of the visual, makes sense because of the acronym, So again, similar to George, his model is named the 5-step customer journey of the Apple analogy, the Apple framework. It's the 5-step customer journey because each is one of the ones that he speaks to in the 5 steps is Apple. So it really needs to make sense as the name. It's not giving it a random name. It needs to be something that makes sense to the model. And the reason we want it to make sense to the model is it makes sense for people to reference it. So, for example, when he goes to speak at an event, or if I go to speak at an event and I say elevation content model, people remember the triangle and they remember elevation. Or for him, when he teaches each one of the words of each of the stages and he breaks them all down in detail, he doesn't have to say to someone, okay, remember all these words. He's like, remember Apple. If you remember Apple, it's going to cue your brain to be like, wait a second, I'm missing a P in there. Or wait a second, I'm missing the E. What's the E? Okay, excite, right. And then you go and you move forward with the model. So it needs to be contextual to the model because it's the reason that people remember it. It's not just because of giving it a random name so it has a name. Last step, or second last step, I guess technically, but last step would be giving it a visual structure. So do you want to, like I said, have it as a pyramid? Do you want to have it as like a Venn diagram? A Venn diagram will be very similar if you're looking up, if you want to just, pull this up on Google, you can look up a genius model, and the genius model is a Venn diagram. It's kind of overlapping circles with each other. You could also have it as a cyclical process, right? So literally a circle that you go around again and again. It also could be a little bit more linear. So maybe it's like a roadmap or a timeline, but you want to come up with some kind of visual. You want to come up with something that allows somebody to feel like they can see the process, they can see the journey, they can see the understanding of the principles or the framework. And the reason I really recommend the graphic again as well is when you're going to do, for example, speaking, if you want to do speaking engagements, if you want to do these or train this even on a webinar, if you want to really, to be honest, teach this anywhere, you really want to have it be something that people can see and understand very easily. You don't want people to struggle to get what you're talking about. It should almost be so simple that anyone can understand it. And then you get to go into the depth of the complexity by, again, the layers of how deep you want to go into the model itself. But you really would teach it in a way that almost anyone can understand, because that's really what allows it to be impactful, is that it's easy to digest, it's easy to understand. The reason I said it's the second last step, which is step 6, is technically something that you could put in here as a step, which is you need to validate it. And, one of the things that I think is really important is that when you have a framework, you can't feel like I made it and I'm done. It needs to be something that when you create a process, you're open to refining it, you're open to revising it. It needs to be that it has the ability to evolve and grow. So even just because I mentioned it, it will make it contextual. So when George first had, and he's been on the podcast and he's taught this framework, so you can go back to his episode if you want to listen to how he explains it, his outcome statements, all the pieces within it. But he actually used to have his framework called the ape sandwich. And the ape sandwich was basically that he had the A on the front, the E on the end, and the P's in the middle were the meat. And the ape sandwich, he actually found that most people didn't remember, right? So he found that like people remembered ape, but then they were like, how many P's were in it? And they were trying to remember the framework, and it was almost difficult for people to remember. So he went to go speak at an event. He's been teaching us, granted, for like a decade, right? So he's been teaching us the ape sandwich for a very, very long time. And so he went to an event, and I remember he shared with me he went to this speaking opportunity, and someone said to him, if you just changed one of the letters, like one of the stages, and the name of it to be, let them know, which is to prepare, is what it used to be. Instead, if you made it let them know, then it could be Apple. And in that moment, he was like, okay, I'm changing my framework, because he asked the audience, how many of you would have easier understood this framework if I had called it the Apple framework? And everyone was like, yeah, 100%. Yes, yes, yes. Okay, so if I had called it the Apple framework, I would have had way more people who remembered what I was teaching, which is exactly what we want. So after a decade, he went back in and said, great, it's the Apple framework now. And so I said to him, are you worried because you've taught it so many places and you called it the ape sandwich here and you called the ape sandwich there? And he said, no, because the basis of it is that it is easy for people to understand. It's easy to explain. And by changing the name, and changing what it was labeled, it makes it easier for recall. So technically, more people are going to have an awareness of it, and more people are going to be able to reflect on it easier and bring it up easier and quicker as a result of me changing the name. So it goes to show the impact and the significance of being open to changing it. So obviously, it could be a situation like that, but it also could be maybe when you're working with clients, you come to realize there's a step missing. I've been using this for 6 months, or maybe you've been using it for 6 years, and you realize that your framework is missing a step, or there's something about this that needs to be a little bit more refined, or just, a little bit more within it to make it really, truly, deeply impactful the way I want it to be. And so if that's the case, you can go back and you can refine it. And so even for any client that I work with, I tell them your framework's never done. It's something you should always have your eyes open and your ears open to listen to all the different ways that it could be refined. Could it be more impactful? Could it be easier to explain? Could it have maybe a more intentional name? Is there opportunity for it to grow in the way that it's being done to allow it to support people at a better or a deeper level? And if it is, it's an invitation for you to go there and say, okay, great, I'm going to take that invitation or I'm not, but it's still always something you want to be taking in regardless. So if you are someone who listening today has realized that I don't have a signature framework and I am realizing very quickly I thought I did and I don't, or maybe you've even, gotten to this point in your business and you haven't had one. And I want to say, like, the thing that I always look at with business is we don't want to overcomplicate it, but we want to streamline it. And so it's not about saying, if let's just say I've built a multiple six-figure business and I don't have a framework. Well, yeah, but in my opinion, it might mean that you've gotten lucky, if I'm going to be honest, because it means that you've probably spent a lot of time explaining to people what you do, a lot of time, doing a lot of custom work with clients, for example, because you don't have a process. Whereas if you did, you could buy back all that time by just having one. So, what I want to do is use today as an invitation for you to say, okay, where could I start to refine? Or maybe could I even take some intentional time set aside to start building this and to start creating this and to look at how I could really take what I do with my clients, what I do in my service, what I do in my course or my coaching or whatever your offer might be, and really make that into something that's streamlined, easy to explain, easy to market, easy to deliver. Because this is when we talk about scaling, and we talk about this on a lot of episodes. We talk about scaling because scaling is not about making things complex. It's actually about doing less, to be honest. It's about streamlining. It's about really focusing only on what matters. It's about looking at the areas where you feel you can dial things in and refine. And for example, if someone comes to me and they don't have a framework, I can usually see signs in their business that they don't have a framework. And by integrating this framework, their business becomes easier, more streamlined, more efficient, more productive as a result. So let this be your invitation to go start your framework. Even if you want to come back to this episode and use it almost as a workshop going through those steps, that would be a great opportunity for you to get the ball rolling. And again, once you have that, the invitation would be to go try that with your clients, really get yourself proof of concept and proof of your process by validating it with using it in that way with clients. We didn't touch on it today, but I do want to plant the seed that it also is extremely impactful when it comes to team. If you are somebody who wants to train someone on how to serve clients, or if you want someone to train somebody on how to do a service underneath your agency, for example, you do want to have a framework that they're following, because otherwise every client is different, every client is unique, and you feel like you're always back to the drawing board trying to figure out, how do I teach this person this client or that client? That's the thing. You're not teaching them this client or that client. You're teaching them the framework. You're teaching them the process. So, with all this, homework for you. Let's give an invitation today to either go back to your signature framework and give yourself a thumbs up. Maybe it's top notch and there's no editing needing to be done. Or maybe you have a framework that needs some revising. Either way, let this be your invitation to go back and make sure that what you've created is working. And if you don't have one, let this be the invitation to create it. So I know today was a little bit meatier when it came to some of the strategy elements. And also, I want to make sure that you know my DMs are open. So if you are listening to this and maybe you took some notes on it, maybe you made a framework, I'd love to see it. I'd love to give you feedback on it. I'd love to be able to say, hey, I might tweak this word, I might tweak this phrase. So if you are someone who does take today's episode and you execute on it, send it on through. If you are not in our ambitious network, you should be. It's an opportunity where you can get my feedback. You can get insight from myself on questions that you have. And so maybe today you're going to go take this and build your framework and you want some feedback on it. You can do things just like that inside the Ambitious Network. So if you're not inside already, just message me the word ambitious and I can send you the link to join us. It's a free community that is for people just like yourself who love this podcast, who love the information, and also, to be honest, want to be surrounded by like-minded women just like yourself who are just as ambitious. So I love diving into all this today. You guys know how my strategy brain works. I love unpacking all of these things. And of course, if I can ever be any help for you and for your business, you know where to find me. But with all that being said, I will see you on the next episode. And as always, stay ambitious.